Hey there, good people, and welcome back to the DNP podcast. I'm your host, Del Bagbidet, and I'm ready for what the draft has in store. We're a couple of days away from the draft, and a huge move changed things in the top 10 as the Bengals traded their pick for Dexter Lawrence. Are the Bengals now AFC North favourites? Also, the Patriots are now the likely destination for AJ Brown after June 1st. What are the ramifications of that move? This pod is available on Spotify, YouTube, and our podcast, so like, rate, subscribe, and all that good stuff so you can stay up to date with each upload. Alright, looks like we'll finally get a solution to the AJ Brown situation in Philly, as Adam Schefter reported that a trade between the Eagles and the Patriots is likely to happen after June 1st, sending the All-Pro wide receiver to New England to reunite with his old head coach Mike Vrabel. Now, I'll be honest with anyone watching this, whether, listening on Spotify, however you find your way here. I'm just happy to be done with this whole speculation, this whole, will he, won't he be traded? Because it just feels like we've kind of been going in circles for the past 2 years about it, where he, laments Jalen Hurts and the offense with passing being an issue, and then, this past season where he hasn't been getting the ball consistently enough, or he's complaining about and they have athletic articles and all this and the like, and just no real progress to the situation now. And Harry Roseman as well in press conferences just saying, well, he's an Eagle now. Well, okay, that's just kind of no real the nugget of information, which I get most GMs do when it comes to press conferences anyway. But it just seems like we kind of, it's dominating the news cycle and there's no real news to be made to it. Now there is. And, with the Patriots being the most likely destination, with him growing up a Patriots fan, now you have the link, obviously, with his former head coach being at the Titans, being the Patriots head coach. It just makes sense that, that would be the place where he goes. And, from an Eagles point of view, they've been making moves in the offseason that lend themselves to, a move being made for AJ Brown, considering the fact they sign Hollywood Brown in free agency to a, double-digit $1 million deal, trade for Tavion Wicks and give him an extension as well. On top of that, you can read the tea leaves that there's moves being made with the idea that AJ Brown would be in the roster when the season starts in September. So, now that we've got this kind of information coming out about a trade happening after June 1st, it's like, okay, now there's confirmation, there's something happening in this point of view. From what I, can glean from this for the Eagles moving forward, it means that, again, a lot is being put on Jalen Hurts' plate, because, it's not going to be the double-headed monster of two real number ones in Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. Now it's just Devontae Smith, who in his own right is, perfectly capable of being a number one receiver in my opinion, but it's, a couple of decent pieces on the receiving end, even in tight end, with Dallas Goedert still being around, and then an offensive line that there's question marks with regards to the staples that have been there in years past. You have Lane Johnson coming off a big injury, Landon Dickerson, he's still got Mailata on the left tackle side, but it's there's gonna be a lot for Jalen Hurts to do to make this offense work, because it's not going to be, the same, star players that you could say it's arguably a super team around them with all the big names and all pro level players around them. This is now, I feel, a situation where Jalen Hurts is going to have to step up in a sense and be the top level quarterback, the MVP level quarterback that we saw at points in 2023, but be that more consistently for this Eagles team to be where they want to go, and that's a Super Bowl, because that's the standard this organization has set for themselves in the recent years. And looking at the rest of the division, the Cowboys have 2 first-round picks coming on Thursday. We'll see how they build the roster out. They looked good at the back end of last season. So we'll see if they can take that momentum into the next season. The Giants having John Harbaugh in, and we'll talk about them in the next section with the Dexter Lawrence trade, but they have 2 top 10 picks, so that's another team in the NFC East with 2 first-rounders. And then you have the Commanders, where they'll obviously hope for Jalen Daniels to be fit for the rest of the season, and if he is, then they are a real threat to the Eagles in being able to retain their NFC East crown for another year. So, this move being made, we'll obviously have to see what the compensation is, and, as opposed to trading in before June 1st, they are getting $7 million back in cap for any potential moves that could be made when training camp comes around, because obviously it's better to trade when you could save money than not save money. I mean, that's just common sense in this case. And when we talk about a GM like Harry Roseman, you can trust him to at least make the right monetary moves and manipulate the cap in a way that gets the best team possible out there on the field. But it is going to, bring a lot into question if Jalen Hurts isn't able to make, chicken salad with the chickens he has, the ingredients he's got in his offense. And, seeing as he is definitely, by the reports, someone who is, I want to say, at fault, but definitely one of the reasons that things went a bit south at AJ Brown in Philadelphia. He's got a lot to prove to make sure that, people see him as not, fully going the Russell Wilson route where there's a full-on decline, and he can actually, be someone who is a leader for the team that gets them another Super Bowl in the locker, as opposed to just having that one Super Bowl and then being seen as a bit of a, I guess, a corny individual, or, just kind of, I don't want to put, the fake label out there, because, again, I obviously don't have any personal relationship with Jalen Hurts, but certainly someone who can have sustained success with a group of players and not, kind of alienate the fan base, the roster, and move forward in a way where they can have the sustained success that is definitely the objective for the Philadelphia Eagles. On the Patriots side of things, this is a move that they needed to make. I mean, we all watched the Super Bowl, right, and we saw how they just did not have enough to compete. And when you also consider the fact that they had the easiest schedule of the century in the season based on the record of their opponents, like, there definitely were improvements that were necessary to be made. And then when you factor in the fact that they released Stephon Diggs, and obviously he has his off the field situation to handle, but also a lot of money that was attached to him on the cap, and then the fact that they missed out on Alec Pierce in free agency, he stays in Indianapolis, and Romeo Doubs, who has obviously been fine so far, gets a good deal, but he's yet to prove himself as a wide receiver one. There was a need to bring in someone of the level of an AJ Brown. Then you consider the fact that he's got that prior relationship with Vrabel. It's some of the best football he's put on the field so far in his career, and he is one of the premier wide receivers in the league. That is something that the Patriots needed to, supply Drake May with the necessary weapons to get to another Super Bowl, and not just have this year being seen as a fluke year that, the Chiefs were out of the question, and the Broncos had Bo Nix injured in the AFC Championship game, so you caught another break there, and then your schedule. It's very easy and very plausible to put the Patriots on fraud watch if they don't have a successful season in this upcoming year, and just past 2025 season as what it could be seen as a fluke. And, catching all the lucky breaks, which, there's an element of every champion needs to have an element of luck to it, but the Patriots had an extreme level of luck attached to him. So to kind of put those allegations to bed, those fraud allegations to bed, you get the necessary improvements in the roster to move forward in the right direction. And considering the fact that they have the 31st overall pick, they probably need a bit more with regards to they probably want a team that was the 31st or the second best team in the league, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, if we were doing those rankings, they probably need a bit of a higher a pick based on the roster they have to their disposal. So it'll be very interesting to see what the compensation is, what they give up in terms of future picks or players on the roster to get AJ Brown through the door. But I guess in this case, when you've got that quarterback on the rookie deal and you've got the Super Bowl appearance, you need to kick on and make sure that this is not just one fluke year, that it is a year that was the start of something for this Patriots era. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Put down in the comments, what do you think? Is this the wrong move for New England? Is there another team that should be kind of stepping in and making a move for AJ Brown? Let you know in the comments. But yeah, from what I can see, this is probably the best situation for all parties involved. Alright, for weeks we knew that Dexter Lawrence had wanted out of New York, and this weekend he got his wish. He's on his way to Cincinnati for the 10th overall pick in this year's draft. And I'll focus on the Bengals for it first, because I think the Bengals should actually kind of be lauded and be kind of praised a bit more for doing the very un-Bengals thing in a sense, right? Because a lot of the times we say, they're skimping out or they're doing this, which obviously they did with Trey Hendrickson and the signing of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase was kind of spread out over a long period. But they did the thing that they rarely do, and that's say, the 10th overall pick, as good as it is, 5 years of contractual control and that, but we should be thinking more short term. And I think when it comes to teams around the league, everyone's kind of got their own timeline with stuff. And considering how the Bengals haven't made the playoffs in 3 years with their quarterback in their prime in Joe Burrow, one of the very much considered a top 5 guy in his position in the league, missing the playoffs for 3 years is kind of like a cardinal sin in that sense. Even if you say, we've had injuries in a year here or there, you should be in the conversation for teams at the top level of the playoffs, not just making it, period, being a thing that's a struggle. And when you've been in that situation, you have you've paid Jamar Chase top of the market money, you've paid T. Higgins great money for the second receiver on the team, you've invested elements, you've invested draft picks in certain areas and they haven't worked out. You kind of just say, drafting a guy out of college is is as great as they can be, on how great it is to have a cost controlled asset. We need to get more proven players, more veterans in the team that can change this image of the Bengals being the nearly team and be a team that with the players at their disposal get to the the deep range of the playoffs more consistently, and not just have their last appearance be their AFC Championship game in 23, where obviously they lose to the Chiefs in that one. They need and have done the thing that's hey, let's make sure our defense, when we invest in our defense and invest in talent and quality on the roster, as opposed to just changing the coaching and hoping that the coaches will, make, turn a turd into a salad. And Bringing in Boye Mafe, free agency, and Cook and Jonathan Allen, and now Dexter Lawrence. Like, there's an effort being made to bring in these, proven veterans that can take the Bengals to not just be a team that, again, it disappoints. And when you've got the quality and the players you have on the offensive side of the ball, you should be doing things that get you, making moves that get you to the top of the playoffs, which they've been far away from. Like, not even making the playoffs in 3 years when you've got that level. Like, I can't remember like the last sort of premier quarterback, because luckily they end up in more stable organizations, but like the top of the line quarterback that misses the playoffs year on year on year, it's not something that happens much, because that's the most important position in the game. And teams that have those guys don't tend to disappoint, even if you say the history of that franchise is disappointment. That look at the Bills, right? You get Josh Allen, you're the top 4 in your conference basically every year when he's at that top level. I mean, yeah, it's just not something you see that much. So, I think it's definitely something to consider the Bengals as one of, if not the definite favourites in their division, right? You look at the Steelers, like they don't have Aaron Rodgers, and looks like, as of now, they're starting Will Howard going into next season. The Ravens obviously get their new coach in. We'll see how that works out for them. They have their first round pick this year, as they obviously managed to keep it with the failed physical of Max Crosby. You look at the Browns, they're still far away from being a contender, in all brutal honesty. So there's a pathway there. There's this door that's slightly ajar for the Bengals to make themselves a team that gets into the playoff, hosts a playoff game, and from there you've got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and now you have Dexter Lawrence to hopefully close some games for you, or at least open the pathway for someone on the outside to make that play at the end that wins a game in December and January. So I'm definitely someone of the mind that good on the Bengals for making this move, even if it is, you could consider it a bit of an overpay, considering that before this trade was made, I was thinking, okay, the Bears at in the 20s, and Detroit, or any team of that sense where they're already competing and they're going over the line. When you're a Cincinnati Bengals team that shouldn't really be where they are at 10, you say, you know what, yeah, come on, Dexter Lawrence, let's bring in that premier interior lineman that can be a difference maker for us now, as opposed to could be in 2 or 3 years, because there's an element of urgency there that the Bengals have to have, missing the playoffs 3 years in a row. From the Giants' point of view, as I said, I'd say it's a bit of an overpay from Cincinnati, so they can be happy in that they've got a quarterback in place already, and now they can supply the roster with 2 top 10 pick level players. Reports are saying that it's going to be, or it's likely to be, like a Jordan Tyson, maybe a Sonny Styles at 5, that sort of sense. You could look at maybe Marino for the offensive line at that 5 pick. But having that luxury of having your franchise quarterback already and having 2 top 10 picks, it's a massive thing where you look at that and say, okay, we've got decent pieces already, in like Brian Burns at 16.5 sacks last year. You have Thibodeau, who you probably keep now that Dexter Lawrence is out the door. You've invested in Malik Neighbors. That's my alarm. You've got Scatterbo, running back, that had a decent rookie year before the injury. There's a crux of a team that can be competitive in the NFC East. As I said, with the Eagles last year maybe on a bit of a downtick, the Cowboys are inconsistent and have been consistent in the past couple of years. The Commanders, Jim Daniels' health, there's a real pathway there, which is easy to say in April, but there is a pathway there for the Giants. And with a top 10 pick and another top 10 pick, that's premium rarefied air in the draft that can be used to your advantage to really make the roster, something to be reckoned with going into this season with the new head coach of John Harbaugh, who I'm sure has his mind on certain players that can bring back the almost Ravens of old, or those players that can be the tent poles for the Giants moving forward. I think Jordan Tyson, who again has been widely speculated to be the pick at 10, makes a lot of sense. You also got Malik Neighbors coming off the ACL, so you would like another premier receiver if Malik Neighbors misses any time going into next season, or just to have kind of two cheap top end receivers in on your roster that can make things work for you. Losing Wanda Robertson in free agency as well. You've still got Darius Slayton, but you'd like to have a Jordan Tyson in there as a second big option that can make a ton of plays for you. And Sonny Styles, we all remember the combine performance he had. He was just a proper athletic powerhouse that can kind of set a real tone for you on the defensive side of the ball. So it's very much a duo that I would subscribe to the notion of the Giants having those two guys and making a big improvement in the 2026 season with the moves made in the offseason. So yeah, I think this is one of, however the payment was, I'd say this is a win-win trade for both sides, and that we could see a big improvement in Dexter Lawrence's play as opposed to last season, and a big improvement in the Giants with using that piece to supplant their roster with a couple more pieces that could get the Giants moving in the right direction. So yeah, I definitely think this is one that serves both sides really well. All right. Thank you for listening to this edition of the DNP podcast. This is available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So, like, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you for listening. What do you think? Do you think there was a winner in the Dexter Lawrence trade, that the Bengals paid too much and that really is going to hold them back going into the future? Do you think the Eagles should even trade AJ Brown? Should they just keep him and kind of make them work it out for the years to come? Let me know in the comments. But thanks for listening. Mock draft before the draft on Thursday coming in before the draft. So keep an eye out on the channel for when that gets uploaded. But again, thank you for listening. See you soon. Bye bye.